Hey guys, I'm not going to be in the picture because I just not. I wanted just to get these done real quick so you can take the quizzes and help your grades. I don't know why, but I didn't do this in the last video. The Allied powers were the other side of World War II. We did in the last lesson, you had the Axis powers, which were mainly Germany, Italy, and Japan. They were also known as the tripartite power or agreement, rather. So those were your three main powers in the Axis. Now, for the Allied powers, starting off, you had Great Britain and France were the two main players starting off, and then later on, the United States and Russia joined. Now, Great Britain, which was led by Winston Churchill, which was the prime minister, and they're under what they call a constitutional monarchy. The constitutional monarchy is basically is they have a monarch figure, which would be Queen Elizabeth II, who is just like a figurehead, but they still have a constitutional government, which is led by the prime minister. In the United States, the president at the time was Franklin Delano Roosevelt. We have a democracy. Russia was Joseph Stalin, which is a communism or dictatorship. And then France, Charles de Gaulle, which is a democratic republic. So those are your four main people in the Allied groups. And I did do a a video on the map. And here are three pictured. You have, this is Winston Churchill. Winston Churchill was a World War I vet. He served during World War I for Great Britain. You have Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and then you have Joseph Stalin. Joseph Stalin has been and was in the military for a very long period of time. All right, that is the Allied powers, and I do apologize for not finishing that up. Now, this next part is going to be about Pearl Harbor. And the main thing that you're supposed to get out of this is, according to the text, and you're going to see different resources, first accounts. How did the bombing of Pearl Harbor impact the United States? That's the first question. The second question, did it lead to America's entry into World War II? So you have a two-part question. Number one, how did Pearl Harbor impact the United States? And number two, did it lead to America joining World War II? Okay, so Pearl Harbor, the attack on Pearl Harbor was on December 7th, 1941. And Pearl Harbor is basically a harbor in the state of Hawaii. So here's a image, and if I'm not mistaken, that is the Arizona, USS Arizona. Now, this is the Honolulu Star Bulletin. It says war. Oahu bombed by Japanese planes. Now, this happened early in the morning on a Sunday. And you have to remember that when this happened, you have people, especially in the eastern coast, that were doing their daily lives and didn't hear about this till later. So, like when the president got the news, he was in a meeting. So, even though it was morning there, it was later on in the day when other people heard about it. So, attack on Pearl Harbor happened on December 7th, 1941. Japanese planes surprised the United States at the U.S. naval base in Pearl Harbor. They destroyed many ships and killed many soldiers. It was this attack that forced the United States into World War II. Now, where is Pearl Harbor exactly? Well, Pearl Harbor is located in the state of Hawaii. Now, here is my little mouse. Here is the United States. Okay, this is DC. We are about right here where the D and the W right there in between. Now, Hawaii is all the way right here. Okay? That's Hawaii. Now, this is an enlarged picture of Oahu. Now, uh, Honolulu is right here. Okay, that's your capital. And Pearl Harbor is actually what you don't see is there's a gap like right here, which allowed the water to come in, and this is where you're going to be having your. Let me see if this does. Nope, it didn't show up. This is where you're going to be having your harbor right here. Okay, so this was the Hawaiian Islands at the time. Now, Hawaii during World War II was not a state; it was a U.S. territory. So it was basically run by the U.S. government, but it didn't have like representation. So basically, Hawaii is in between California and you have Asia over here. So here's Japan. So Japan's route was from Japan, and they flew in, and their attack was right there. Okay. So that is where Pearl Harbor is located. It is located in the Pacific Ocean, a few hours away from California and a few hours away from Japan. Now, before the attack, World War II had been raging in Europe and Asia for 2 years. Okay, now why was it raging in Asia? It was raging in Asia because of the fact that it was part of the German and Italian group, but also you had what was known as the Pacific Theater, and that's where you had the Asian fighting coming in. The United States had not entered the war yet. So from 1939 to the end of 1941, the United States stayed out of the war. The Empire of Japan was trying to take over much of Asia and was worried about the U.S. Navy in Hawaii. Now, why were they worried? Because the U.S. had a large naval fleet, okay? And you have Asia right here. Asia is a large continent that is blocking all European entities from coming over and stopping any attack they may have. So they took out the Hawaiian Islands because it took out the U.S. forces' trip to get to Japan. Because back then, the planes couldn't just fly from U.S. all the way to Japan like they do now. They actually had a stop-off point. And the stop-off point, they would go from United States to the Hawaiian Islands, and then they could fly over to Guam and all that other stuff over here, and then go to Japan. So what Japan wanted to do is they wanted to take out all United States military forces that they could, naval forces, because the ships and the airplanes could stop them from trying to take power. So that's one of the reasons why the Japanese wanted to take out America. Another reason was, and you'll see here in a second, was the fact that the Japanese didn't want to conquer the United States. They, even to force this attack on Hawaii and Pearl Harbor, the United States was too much of an attack. I'm sorry, the United States was too much of a threat to the newly acquired territories. So the United States had these territories over here, like the Philippines, or these smaller islands. They got all of these after different wars. So they gained those lands. So you had naval operations in these little islands littering the Pacific Ocean. So they wanted to take those out. So with holdings in the Philippines, Guam, America Samoa, and other small islands, Japan was vulnerable to U.S. naval attack. A swift first strike against the bulk of the United States Pacific Fleet would seriously cripple the Americans' ability to respond. So Japan wanted to kind of take out the big guns before they made a big move, basically. The hopes of the The hopes were that Japan could capture the Philippines and the American island holding before the American Navy could recuperate and retaliate. An implication. Um, wait, yes. Okay, their forces would stretch across the entire Pacific Rim. The United States, they were being distracted by European events. They didn't even think about that the Japanese would come and try to do something like this. It just it literally took us by surprise. Now, another thing that the Japanese did, or why they did it, was because they were upset because of the Treaty of Versailles, how that all went down, because they were not allowed to be involved with the Treaty of Versailles, and they were upset, and they held a grudge against America because America was leading the charge in that battle. So the end product, in the hopes were that Japan could capture the Philippines and American islands holding before America could recuperate and retaliate. So basically, Japan wanted to hold the Pacific Rim. They wanted to hold the Pacific Theater all to themselves. So the Japanese thought that if they took out the warships in Pearl Harbor, then the United States Navy would be crippled and could never attack. However, they were mistaken, and the attack on Pearl Harbor just had the opposite result. The United States declared war the next day. This is an image. This shows the position and places and what the end result of the battle or the bombing was. You have destroyers, which are blue. You have the other vessels, which are much larger, as you can see. And as you can see, that they went for the larger battleships over here. So the yellow means they were damaged. They were able to be restored and put back into business, rather. The reds were totally destroyed. You had the USS Arizona, USS West Virginia, Oklahoma, and California. Those were the larger ships that were destroyed. You have down here Downs and Kaysen, and then you have Detroit over here, which were destroyed. The one that you probably hear about the most is the USS Arizona. It had thousands of sailors that perished on board because they were stuck underneath or other things happened. It was a terrible event. Now, the attack itself on Pearl Harbor came as a complete surprise. Hundreds of Japanese fighter planes and bombers flew to Pearl Harbor and attacked. The bombers dropped bombs and torpedoes on the warships, while fighter planes attacked U.S. fighter. The Japanese fighter planes actually attacked U.S. fighter planes while they were on the ground, so they couldn't take off and fight back. There were two waves of attack. By the end of the second wave, a number of U.S. ships were destroyed. The biggest loss was the sinking of the USS Arizona. Over 1,100 U.S. military personnel died when the USS Arizona sunk. I used to have a video, so that's why I was just wondering if that was the video. Okay, now this next is. It's not going to let me do it. Okay, so what happened next was the U.S. That's Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And if you ever have time, you can look it up on YouTube. You can probably look up FDR Pearl Harbor, and it'll show his speech. It's the famous one. It says, on December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy, the Empire of Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. Now, what Franklin Delano Roosevelt is doing at this moment, he is addressing Congress because um, the president himself cannot declare war. It's because of checks and balances. Congress has to be the body that would officially declare war. So, what the president is doing at this time is he is asking Congress to declare war on the Empire of Japan. And once that happened, on December 8th, when Congress approved that, America officially joined the war. And later on, when they joined the World War II, you had Germany and Italy that would later on declare war on the United States. Now, after the Pearl Harbor attack was the first time after years of discussion and debate, the American people were united in the determination to go to war. The Japanese had wanted to goat, which means to kind of force the United States into an agreement to lift economic sanctions against them because the United States was holding them accountable for something. Instead, they have pushed their adversary into a global conflict that ultimately resulted in Japan's first occupation by a foreign power. So it was said that one of the um, military men, the generals on for Japan, said that he woke up a sleeping giant, and he's referring to the United States as a sleeping giant. And it did. It wasn't a good result for the Japanese towards this. So, like I said, on December 8th, 1941, Congress approved Roosevelt's declaration of war. 3 days later, the Japanese allies of Germany and Italy declared war on the United States. For the second time, Congress reciprocated, and more than 2 years after the start of the conflict, the United States entered World War II. Now, the total devastation of what actually happened, like we said, the most devastating was that of Pearl Harbor. At Pearl Harbor was the USS Arizona. The USS Arizona accounted for over half of the 2,403 total deaths. 1,177 men died on the battleship USS Arizona when a 1,765-pound armor-piercing bomb exploded, igniting the powder magazine. So what happened is you had a bomb that went right through the USS Arizona and landed in a full, this was full, powder magazine. That's where they would hold all the ammunition area. So you have a bomb that landed inside basically a bunch of other bombs. Admiral Kimmel, who saw the explosion, said he saw I quote, the Arizona lift out of the water, then sink back down, way down, end quote. The Arizona's fuel tank was at 95% fuel. Her powder magazine was full. Her ammunition magazine was full. This combination led to an unforgettable explosion. At 0808, which is 8 o'clock in the morning, just 13 minutes into the attack, an armor-piercing bomb ignited in the forward magazine of the Arizona. That ensuing explosion caused death from the impact, smoke inhalation, burning, and drowning. It only took 9 minutes for the USS Arizona to sink. And this was an image of the USS Arizona. These are large vessels. These are large battleships. It's nothing like you see here. These are huge. And for that explosion to sink a vessel like this in under 10 minutes is just devastating. And this is also an image of the USS Arizona as it is sinking. As you can see, there's smoke. And like I said, some people died of smoke inhalation. And but you have to remember there was a lot of people who were actually under the inside of the boat under the water level. So that's where most of them passed away. Now, here is a thing by the numbers. You can stop and look at this. I'm not going to spend much time on it, but it says basically it's a breakdown of all the people who were involved. You have the Navy, Army, Marines, and civilians. You have the Navy and the Army Air Corps, which was the airplanes. And then you have the type of ships that were damaged during this time. And it also tells how long it took to repair each ship. So that is Pearl Harbor. I'm sorry to have to go through this so fast, but Pearl Harbor is an interesting topic if you ever want to do some research on it. But it was the turning point in World War II when the United States joined, and it helped. At this point in time, Europe wasn't looking too good, and the Allied powers wasn't looking too good. So when the United States joined, they brought in a fresh energy with them, and it helped win the war, or what helped win the war. So I will put a quiz up either tonight or tomorrow that can help you with your social studies grade. Have a good night, y'all.